Good evening and welcome back to the Savvy Street Show. We have our political panel yet again, and if you recall, they're the ones who perfectly forecasted the election results and post the election in November. We had a pretty good session as well on the initial um appointments that Donald Trump had. So first up, I have Ruth Papazian. She is an award-winning writer who became a political consultant rather, to help centrist Democrats unseat the leftist ones. Welcome back, Ruth.
Thank you. I am thrilled to be with all of you tonight.
Oh, that's great. We have Ed Mazlish, who ran for political office in New Jersey, and in 2016, he was a delegate for the presidential candidate at the time, Ted Cruz. Welcome back, Ed.
Thanks. Happy to be here. Good to see you all.
Okay, and we have Roger, who is a philosopher and a political libertarian. He unsuccessfully ran for the U.S. House of Reps in 1976. Welcome back, Roger.
Well, I think it was very successful. I didn't win. That's the success. Thank you. Good to be here.
Thank you. That was the bio supplied by you, by the way. And last but not the least, we have David Harriman, who is a physicist and author, and he brings the perspective of Ayn Rand's philosophy to politics. Welcome back, David.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
Okay, let's jump in. Been a little bit more than 30 days. Started with a lot of executive orders. I think the first one was about restoring freedom of speech, but then there were 3 in a row on education, and I was absolutely thrilled by that. Pretty much all of them are thrilling, except one. But let's go to Ed first. Which EO thrilled you the most, and are there any so far that you were not expecting, any that you were disappointed by?
I feel like it's Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner and everything looks good.
Oh, that's great.
And if I had to pick one that I thought was the best, it's a hard call because there are so many that are so good, but I think I would say that the Doge executive order is the best one. The free speech stuff sounds really good, but those are really just directions to the executive branch that can be reversed going forward. It really needs congressional legislation. But what Doge is doing, I mean, we can already see, a month in, how much fraud and abuse they're finding. I'm not even going to say waste, because I don't even think it's waste. I think it's fraud and abuse. Yeah. I think that that Musk and his team are exposing a vast money laundering program that's taking money from the taxpayers, funneling it through third world governments and NGOs, and money disappears. We learned in the last week or so that Zelensky can't account for about $100 billion that the U.S. gave him. I have no doubt that money wound up back in the pockets of the politicians who voted to send it to him. And Musk is revealing that. And I would say that if I had to pick one executive order that I love the most, it would be the Doge executive order.
Okay, Ruth?
Well, the number and speed of the EOs is breathtaking. If this were a movie, it would be Trump Part 2 with a vengeance. So in preparing for the show today, I went back to our last podcast, which was just before Election Day, to review my day one wishes. So that was withdraw from the WHO and the Paris Accords, check. Restart permits for Keystone Pipeline and other pipelines, check. Pardon the J6 political prisoners, check. Reinstate stay in Mexico, check. Resume construction of the wall, check. Deport criminal aliens and those with fraudulent asylum claims, check. So, I mean, it's, it is thrilling. It's all thrilling. But if that wasn't all thrilling enough, then Trump did exceed my expectations with the creation of Doge, as Ed mentioned. Also, rescinding rules and regulations and actions by the DOJ and Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms that restrict our Second Amendment rights. And of course, just keeping biological men and boys out of women's sports. And that one was actually preceded by making the official policy of the United States to recognize just two sexes, male and female. Like I said, it's Thanksgiving, Christmas, 4th of July, everything all rolled into one.
Roger, any single one?
Sure. Doge is definitely the star of the show. I liked it a lot. Ayn Rand had a word for the people who are squealing and complaining, and it was looters. The looters have been caught. And when you hear people in the Republican Party clutching their hankies about, oh, I don't know if this is a good idea, well, you can probably figure that they are not far from being exposed themselves. I agree with Ruth that what excited me a lot about his executive orders was just the sheer number of them. Steve Bannon said that he was, he was something about flooding the zone with, I'll say crap, because that's, we may have a censor here, but he was flooding the zone with these things. Well, what have they been doing to him for the last 8 years? They've been flooding the zone with attacks on Trump. And I don't have to go through the litany. We've all talked about it before. And so this is a counterattack. This is a very strong, vigorous counterattack, and it's overwhelming the left. It's putting them severely off balance, which they richly deserve. And the other thing that excites me about these executive orders is so many of them are going to, and already are, leading to court challenges. And you might say, oh, they'll stop Trump now. No, it's almost like Brer Rabbit in the Song of the South, which some of you may not have seen, but oh, don't throw me in that briar patch, which is exactly what he wanted. He wanted to be thrown in the briar patch because then they couldn't get him. Well, go to court. Okay, I think the Supreme Court is going to come through on at least some of these. They have some longstanding bad legal precedents that are going to be revisited, and some of them may be ripe for overturning, and we'll have to see. But in general, this is stuff that Trump campaigned on, and so it's promises made, promises kept, and not just empty promises, because I think the court is going to back him up on this.
Right. David?
I'm astounded at how well this thing was planned. I mean, all these things were written in advance, and he was ready to go on day one.
Yep.
And the speed at which he's moved is beyond anything I've ever seen in my lifetime. I mean, way beyond. Now, if you want me to pick out one issue that I think is going to be really transformative for this country, it's the energy issue, because energy is the lifeblood of civilization, and the left has launched a full-out attack against it. And Trump is taking the exact opposite view. He's shutting down this nonsense about climate hysteria and, drill, baby, drill. And, we're going to get back to producing our own energy. We're lucky in the sense that the United States has more energy resources than almost any country in the world. Saudi Arabia, Russia maybe can rival us, but we have an amazing amount. We can be not only independent, but energy exporters if we just free up the industry. And that would make a huge change, I think, in our economics, in our standard of living. Is fighting for freedom. He got shot that one time. He stood up, put his fist in the air, and said, "Fight." That's what he's doing. So he's not going to back down.
Excellent. I'm going to move to the U.S. foreign policy, particularly two very big issues. But we'll start with Ukraine. And Rand had a huge sort of paragraph after paragraph against the draft. And unfortunately, it's not just Ukraine, Russia, and several European countries have a draft. Ukraine's from age 25. Biden tried to reduce it to age 18. They've dragging people kicking and screaming into the army. They have banned anyone between the age of 18 and 60 to even leave the country. And I'll start with Roger on that one. What's your view of the Ukraine-Russia war and how, or more particularly, of how Trump has reacted to it?
Well, what concerns me currently about all of that, and it's a very interesting issue for a number of reasons, is all this posturing that's being done by the UN and by the Beltway crowd. I mean, people at Cato and people on the Wall Street Journal and so on. The UN's vote to condemn Putin may be just virtue signaling, but I suspect it's also an attempt to undercut what Trump is trying to do. They want him to fail. They want to get rid of him, as the saying goes, by any means necessary. He's trying to make a deal. That's his thing, is to make deals. And I see a lot of resistance to that. I see a lot of people wanting the war to continue.
Yes.
Now, if you want to bring someone to the peace table, there's a basic rule. The last thing you do is publicly condemn or humiliate them. I know some people say, oh, Putin doesn't care because he's a sociopath and nothing's going to faze him and he'll do what he's going to do and it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter. Anything that undercuts Trump's flexibility and credibility for driving this negotiation process. It does not move the process forward to tell Putin what a rotten SOB he is. It doesn't work if you're in psychotherapy. It doesn't work if you're in marital counseling, and it doesn't work for peace negotiating. You just don't do that. I think the timing is extremely suspicious. As they say, timing is everything. In this case, this big virtue signal by the UN, it's more than a day late and a dollar short. Where were they 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago? Why now? Well, the reason now is Trump is trying to get something done and they don't want him to succeed, I think. And I know I'm mind reading, but their minds are pretty easy to read.
Yeah.
I think it's just a disingenuous. It's a cover up for
David,
the.
sorry.
Yeah,
go
I'm sorry. I know there are a lot of innocent, well-meaning people who don't realize that they're shooting Ukraine and themselves in the foot. But I just say, look more closely behind the scenes. It's like in The Wizard of Oz. Who's pulling your strings? And don't play into their hands. Look behind the curtain while we still have time to get clear about what's going on.
I saw David nodding his head. I was disappointed a little bit in the way he kind of abused Zelensky, but most of it is going to come out all right. Somewhere between 200 to 500 billion dollars of rare earth minerals. So let's move to David. David?
Oh, I don't think this Russia-Ukraine war should ever have started. And I don't think there was ever any reason for it. If Trump had been president, it never would have started. And this is one of the first things people need to understand. The left had an opportunity to stop this war, at the very beginning. Because if you look back at Putin's demands, they really weren't unreasonable. He did not want Ukraine to join NATO. Well, I'm not sure Ukraine deserves to be in NATO. He didn't want Ukraine to take Crimea. Well, nobody in Crimea wants Ukraine to take Crimea. They didn't want Ukraine to have dangerous weapons that could be, used against Russia. Well, okay. And we were helping them, develop those weapons. So this war could have been shut down right at the beginning. And the left, Biden being their puppet, refused to do that. If Trump had been, president in 2020, the way he should have been, there's no way this war ever would have started. And the same goes true for the war in the Middle East. So we have two horrible wars going on right now. Neither one of them ever would have happened if Trump had been in the White House.
Ed.
Well, building on what David said, of course the war wouldn't have started had Trump been president, because the war started because Kamala Harris, at Biden's urging or with Biden's approval, said that Ukraine could join NATO, or that that's something that we could consider. And that was a red line for Putin. Putin had signaled it was a red line, and he invaded, I think it was 5 days later. Also building on what David said, not only did Biden and the left have the opportunity to stop this war at the beginning, they had 2.5, almost 3 years to stop it once it started. They did nothing. All they did was throw more fuel on the fire.
Including
as far as
blowing up the pipeline.
What? What's that?
Including blowing up the pipeline, right?
Including blowing up the pipeline. That's right. They did everything they could to make this war bloodier, longer, and just more deadly. And as far as Trump's policy is concerned, I think one of the really interesting things that's happened, since Trump became president is, they accuse him of trying to run the government like a business. And in the case of this Ukraine minerals deal, it's almost the reverse. In business, if Biden made a crappy deal, you're stuck with it. You sign a contract. If it's a bad deal, you're stuck. But when it's governments, Trump is acting like a statesman. He's acting like a diplomat, and Ukraine has no leverage. They have no bargaining power. And Russia has bargaining power in these negotiations, and the United States has negotiating power in these negotiations. And Trump is using that leverage to say, no. You don't go and repay as loans the money that the Europeans gave you and just take our money and not give us anything back. We're going to renegotiate that. And that's more of a government sort of realpolitik kind of move than a businessman's move. A businessman would be stuck with the bad deal that his predecessor made. And that's just not the case here. And I find that really interesting. And as far as, the humiliating your opponent, kind of, humiliating people in a negotiation, I think that when Trump humiliated Zelensky, it was proper and good and borderline necessary. Zelensky has this inflated view of what he's entitled to and what he can get. He's not taking any responsibility for even today. He continues to offer to join NATO, completely ignoring the fact that that's the primary cause of the war in the first place. And I think when Trump humiliated him and said, you're not going to get, you're not going to get these things, and when Trump called him names, I think that Zelensky needs to be taken down not just one peg but multiple pegs. The guy is a dictator. The guy hasn't had elections. The guy is imprisoning political opponents. He's had martial law since the war started. This guy is not Thomas Jefferson, and I'm glad that Trump is willing to say that.
Let me just piggyback on that about the mineral rights and all that. And you talked about what a statesman, Ed, what a statesman Trump is being. I think it's genius when they're wondering, how are we going to have peacekeeping forces in there? Are there going to have to be troops on the ground? And Trump says, no. We're just going to have American business in there working with Ukrainians, pulling out the mineral resources, and Russia's going to leave us alone. It'd be really incredibly stupid for Russia to attack those people in the mineral region working on those resources.
Right.
This is perfect. This is like using a non-military security device. It's brilliant.
Yep.
It is indeed, and there is another thesis actually from George Friedman about not specifically why he was trying to not include Zelensky, but what he was trying to do was create a new world order. So he, of all the places, he chose Riyadh, Saudi Arabia to meet Putin. Everyone expected he would go to Hungary, but no. And I suspect they discussed Gaza as well, besides the mineral deal. And insofar as the mineral deal is concerned, both Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance has backed him up. Together had a conversation with Zelensky a while ago on the minerals, and they both insist he agreed to give them the rare earth minerals, or 49% of whatever the deal is, and then he suddenly backed out. So I don't think we're necessarily relying on someone who can be, he's not necessarily reliable either, Zelensky. But the question is Trump trying to create a new world order as such, pivoting to Russia to isolate China, which is kind of seen as a bigger threat, because this new deal will contain Putin once and for all? Or is that just horses for courses? Let me start with David.
Well, I don't want to call it New World Order because that already has a connotation that's pretty bad, right? But is he trying to shift the whole global power alignment? Yes, and I think he's going to be able to do that. He's going to use the U.S. leverage in a way that our past leaders have not been using it to any advantage. Let me just mention one thing that most people have strongly disagreed with. The idea of our taking over Greenland, like maybe making Greenland a state. Okay, I think it's brilliant. Think about it. Denmark has control of Greenland right now, right? Okay, Greenland is more than 4 times the size of New York State, and it has a total of 60,000 people living on it. Okay, basically it's uninhabited. It has these tremendous resources. Nobody's using them. And the few people in Greenland would be 10 times better off if Greenland belonged to the United States. So it's a win-win, and it's national security. So this is the kind of thing that Trump is doing. Remember, he used to be a real estate guy. He's looking around the world. He's saying, well, okay, this is a total loss for Denmark. It's a huge plus for us. He has that ability to look around the world and make deals that are consistently in the best interests of the United States.
Hey, let me go to Ruth. We sort of combining the previous question and this one, which is on Trump's strategy for the Ukraine war and whether he's trying to create a new world order.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry, first of all, for winking out. My internet went out again, and I'm now talking to you from my smartphone. So as far as Ukraine goes, Trump wants Europe to take responsibility for Ukraine's security, mostly. And he also wants American taxpayers to get paid back the, what is it now, $300 billion spent on the Ukraine-Russia war. And it must be said that even Zelensky says he doesn't know where a huge chunk of it went. So this rare earth minerals deal that Zelensky will be in Washington tomorrow to formalize after initially rejecting. So that's about recouping some of our money, but he's using trade as a way to bind Ukraine to us in some sort of a security arrangement, but it's not going to be boots on the ground. And he signaled that to Europe. He basically said, Ukraine is like your part of the world. You are responsible. Now, Trump correctly considers access to rare earth minerals to be a significant national security issue because China has the world's largest rare earth reserves. I think it's something like 44 million metric tons. Now, in comparison, the United States has only 1.9 million metric tons. So this is the reason why we rely on China for critical components. They manufacture, for the military, medical, consumer technology, because they require these rare earth elements. So over the course of his term, I do expect Trump to reduce the rare earths gap with China by cutting deals with Greenland, as well as Australia, Brazil, Canada, India, Vietnam, and other countries that have large deposits of these rare earths. And as far as the New World Order goes, yeah, we need one. We need a New World Order that isolates and diminishes China and Iran. Now, for me personally, and I've been posting on Facebook about this for years, it's unacceptable that China has actually gotten a foothold in our own hemisphere with the Belt and Road initiatives, that it has been built roads, bridges, and infrastructure in the Bahamas, Grenada, Panama, among others. So this is not a no strings attached altruism. I mean, China wants ports and military bases in return. So Trump needs to stop this. And calling up Panama for giving China effective control over the canal was a good start. Did we get to Gaza yet? Did I miss Gaza?
No, I mean, I'll move on to Ed. Is this the
Okay.
New World Order or horses for courses?
So much to respond to in all these comments. I agree. I like David's comment about resisting the term New World Order. I won't use that either. I do think Trump wants to. I think he wants to go back in time to when the wall fell down in 1989 and the Soviet Union fell in 1991, and the U.S. was the unipolar superpower, and we were the only, we were the big guy in town. And I think from Trump's view, every president since that time, from Bush 41 to Clinton to Bush 43 to Obama, and then to Biden, skipping over the Trump years, every one of those presidents has been committed to to destroying the United States' preeminent role in the world. And I think Trump is seeking to restore the U.S. as the preeminent and unipolar hegemon of the world, like we were when the wall fell. And I think that's what that's all about. Having a meeting in Riyadh, I think that's more about the Gaza proposal and getting Russian support for the Gaza proposal and really getting the Saudis on board with it than it is about including the Saudis in any kind of revision to the world power structure. As far as the Greenland, Canada, Panama Canal?
Guys, we'll move on to that in the next kind of question, if you will. If
Okay,
is that
that's fine.
Roger, New World Order or not really?
Well, I see this a little more like Ruth does. I think that the real problem we have is with Iran and China. And unfortunately, it's not just a real politic issue, it's a real economic issue. And the BRICS nations, you've got Iran and China in with the Saudis and Russians and so many others. And I think what now this may be a brilliant move or it may be just a lucky accident on Trump's part, but it looks to me like he's trying to drive a wedge between the Saudis and Russians on the one hand and Iran and China on the other. Who is involved in the Riyadh discussions? Well, China and Iran, they're big and powerful and bellicose, but they're not there. Instead, the Saudis there and Russians are there. And it's not just because of oil. I think he doesn't regard them as inherently adversarial. Everybody says, oh, gosh, no, not adversarial. In fact, Trump is a stooge for Putin. No, he just sees that's where it makes the most sense for our security to be aligned in all of this setting up the way things are going to be going forward in Ukraine and Israel. Vance's speech and Stefanik's speeches that she's going to make likely to the UN are going to drive the wedge even deeper because they're both very good speakers. So if the rare earth minerals are so, and they are vital to our security. We need to keep Russia closer to us so that they say, "Oh, sure, go in there and you guys can exploit that stuff. That's fine, and we'll let you do it." Uh, whereas if we're you know slapping Putin in the face and saying, "You brutal dictator, you brutal monster," you know, uh, he might still say, "Oh, come on, let's just make a deal," or he might say, "Screw you guys." So I think it's really everything about how Trump is handling the Ukraine thing makes a lot of sense to me. And you said you wanted to talk about Greenland later, so I'll shut up for now.
Okay. I mean, there was a point I think Ed made and you made as well, which is very important, and it had escaped me, I must admit, because I wrote about Ukraine and I wrote about a peacekeeping force. And Sir Keir Starmer, as soon as he heard of the minerals deal, he was suddenly, even though he wasn't invited to the party, saying, "Oh well, we'll also provide British troops because there's some money in there, minerals deal." But instead of a armed peacekeeping force, if you have civilians and businessmen and engineers and workers that have American, British nationalities, whatever, and they get hit by a drone, it is an attack on our citizens. And that too not military, on citizens. So I don't think Putin will throw a drone over anywhere near these things ever again. And on Gaza, I personally think, and we're moving over to that now, I do think the Saudis are the most critical nation, more than Egypt and Jordan. The Gulf countries as a whole, at any given point in time, have 20 million migrant workers, some of whom don't speak Arabic. And the Gazans, 1.7 million, and 10 out of the 20 million are in Saudi Arabia, far away in the sense of you can't have these rocket launches and invade Israel suddenly because they're not bordering on Israel. The Gazans speak Arabic, as far as I know. The religion is common, the culture is common. Any Gazan above 16 is likely to find a job in Saudi. It's not a burden they're actually getting, and they always want more migrant workers. They house about 2 million pilgrims during that big festival, the Five Pillars Festival. The two of the holiest shrines of Islam are in Saudi. So, back to Gaza, Greenland, Canada, I want to throw that all into one question. We'll start with David. Was that just kind of, were they diversions? Are they serious? I mean, Canada,
Well,
everybody.
I don't know how serious he is about Canada. I mean, Canada is, for whatever reason, the people there seem to be more or less, most of them anyway, loyal to Canada and reject being part of the United States. Now, I don't doubt that they would be better off being part of the United States, but they don't see it that way, and I don't think that's a serious proposal. Greenland, I think, is a fantastic idea for becoming the 51st state. Remember, everybody thought that making Alaska a state was ridiculous back when that happened. And it turned out to be one of the best deals in history and the best possible outcome for the Alaskan people. Mm-hmm. And the same thing is true of Greenland. Now, there's almost no people in Greenland, but the fishing industry is great. They have natural resources. They're in a strategic location. China and Russia, if they could, wouldn't mind basing aircraft carriers and submarines off the coast of Greenland, which is very close to our eastern shores, very easy to hit us. So it is a national security issue. So better for Greenland, way better for us. Win-win. I'm 100% in favor of that.
Ed?
Well, I'm going to separate out the Gaza piece of the puzzle, because I think that is a separate issue. Although it's also related to the point I want to make, which is even if the Canada thing is just trolling on Trudeau, even if the Greenland people don't want to become part of the U.S., and even insofar as the people of Panama want to enforce the agreement that Carter made and keep the canal themselves. I mean, even insofar as none of it is going to happen politically, to me, the most important aspect of it is that Trump is asserting civilizational self-confidence. And that is something that has been sorely lacking, not just in America, but in the West for a long time. And to me, that's even more important than all the strategic goals that David correctly pointed out. How long have we heard from people on the right that Islam wouldn't be a threat if only we had civilizational self-confidence? And here we have a guy who is asserting civilizational self-confidence, saying, yeah, we are better than Canada, and Canada, you would be better off if you were with us, even if you don't realize it. And I just think that alone makes the whole proposal worthwhile to me. Now, the Gaza proposal, I think, is tangentially related to that, but I think it's also related to trying to end the wars in the Middle East. And every time there's a war, we get not peace, but a truce and a ceasefire, which is just a timeout until the war restarts. And I think Trump is trying to figure out a way to just end the wars. And Vinay, I know that you talked about the Gazans maybe getting jobs in Saudi Arabia. Nobody wants them. The Saudis don't want them. The Jordanians don't want them. And there's a reason for it. It's not because they're racist or prejudiced against them. It's that everywhere these people go, they cause trouble. They've caused trouble. They caused trouble when they went to Jordan. They caused trouble when they went to Syria. They caused trouble when they went to Lebanon. They are troublemaking people. And, Trump is saying, well, we need to get them out of Gaza. We need to get the Saudis and the Jordanians and the Egyptians and others in the region invested in a business venture in Gaza. And part of it is what I was saying about Greenland and Canada and Panama, namely that the U.S., that Trump is asserting civilizational self-confidence and saying we can fix anything and we can do anything. But part of it is a genuine attempt to try and end the wars there. That's my take on it.
Okay, Ruth?
Okay, just like Ed, I want to deal with Gaza first because it's kind of out there, not connected to all the other things. So first, I just want to say that when Trump said that we'd own it, he didn't mean we would, literally own Gaza. What he meant was we would own the responsibility of ensuring that Gaza is rebuilt without the construction materials being diverted by Hamas to rebuild their tunnels, is what I think he meant by that. Now, I think it's a stroke of genius to encourage the Saudis and other oil-rich Persian Gulf states to do the actual construction. I think that after working on this project together, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, they might join the Abraham Accords, and Iran's influence in the region then will be greatly diminished. So I think that is part of Trump's thinking. There's always layers and layers behind what he says. I mean, what he says sounds sometimes bombastic, sometimes fantastical, but it's an onion. And when you peel back the layers, you see that there's depth and to his ideas. And, he has bold and unconventional ideas. And what he's doing is he's taking up the status quo and expanding the realm of what is possible. So now getting back to Canada and the rest of those. Okay, so almost 60% of Canada's trade is with the U.S., and that's about 40% of its GDP. Okay, so now with more terrorists crossing the border into the U.S. from Canada than from Mexico, Trump can literally collapse the Canadian economy with tariffs if the border isn't tightened up. He has this leverage. And And again, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but Canada also has significant rare earth reserves. I think it's like 15 million metric tons, something like that. So Trump could actually use tariffs to pressure Canada to give us access to those on very favorable terms. So now, to peel the onion back a little more, the Canadians have already lost confidence in Trudeau. Their economy is really bad. I think that the individual provinces do more trade with the U.S. than with each other, if you can believe such a thing. So they're really in a bind. And I think by calling Trudeau the governor of our 51st state, by ridiculing him like that, I think that was the final straw for his political career. So even if Canada will not become our 51st state, his tariffs can sour the Canadians on the Liberal Party. And I think that Canada might end up going rightward, like so many other countries have. And Trump will be there giving them that push. I do believe that we will not be purchasing Greenland, and it's because Denmark doesn't need the money. They are awash in money from American demand for Ozempic, so they don't really need money from us to buy Greenland. But Greenland could, again, cut a rare earth minerals deal with us, and in addition to beefing up their defenses against Russian and Chinese incursions into the Arctic region. So Trump is, they say that he plays 3D chess. Maybe he plays 4D chess, There's much more to the things that he says and does than meets the eye initially. And I personally think that this rare earths thing is going to be the thread that connects everything. Everything will be connected by this one thread. Time will tell, but that's what I'm thinking right now.
A 51st state thing with Canada.
Mm-hmm.
It would be electorally a disaster for the United States, whether it was Canada as a whole, which makes no sense at all as one state, or 12 or however many provinces there are, 12 states, most of which are liberal, and it's just going to really mess up whatever chance we have to maintain some sanity electorally. So obviously he didn't mean that. He was tweaking Trudeau. He was rattling his cage, and a good riddance, I say to that. Now, Ruth mentioned the rare earth minerals in Canada. I think there are also a lot of them in Greenland, which is another reason for the national security being tied to some sort of deal, whether they become another state or we just work out an arrangement like the Donbass region or wherever the stuff is in Ukraine. We can there's more than one way to skin a cat. We can get what we need one way or another, and if you don't like that way, well, how about this? So I think it's brilliant. As far as, I'll just close it off by saying about Gaza, it might not have been a smart idea to whoever made that video showing the big golden statue of Donald Trump in the new Gaza, but otherwise it's a glowing vision of the future, and at least some people have to be excited by that. Others probably are horrified and think, "Oh, it's neo-Nazi." But I think something wonderful is going to happen there as soon as they get those people out, and they need to get them as far away from Israel as they can, because they're just homicidal troublemakers, and they applaud the death of innocent people. And you need to get them somewhere far away. Maybe Greenland. Let's put them in Greenland. Maybe that'd be good.
Maybe
Hey, what do you have against the people of Greenland? Hey,
the Titanic. I love it. The Titanic.
It's only 60,000
I mentioned Saudi because they love migrant workers in Saudi. They have a need for at least 10 million every year. There was only one thing in the Gaza so-called ceasefire deal, which actually started negotiation in the Biden administration, and that did disturb me, which is the last deal is a ratio of 150 to 1, sometimes it's 50 to 1 of prisoners to live hostages. This time it was 600 prisoners to 4 dead bodies.
Oh,
And I can't see why that kind of keeps going on. Maybe they knew, and maybe Trump is just going to say to Netanyahu, unleash the force. So we didn't finish with Roots. Anything more on Gaza?
Well, I agree with you. I don't know why Israel enters into these kind of deals with these terms, but it's probably because of pressure from its own citizens. They basically wanted him to do whatever it took to get the hostages back, and this is what it took. I think the dead bodies, though, will stiffen the backbones of the Israeli liberals. And I think maybe Netanyahu will be able to negotiate tougher terms in the future. As for Trump, I mean, Trump obviously loves children, and I think he was shaken to the core by the Bibas children who were strangled to death.
oh,
And so he's not going to put U.S. boots on the ground. But I think he's, unlike Biden, he's going to give Netanyahu a freer hand to unleash all hell on Hamas. Again, he said there'll be all hell unleashed. He didn't say we would do it. He left that vague. I think he's going to give Netanyahu the green light to do what has to be done.
Okay, let's move back to domestic policy, or really, this is legislation. And we find that quite odd out here outside the US. The president has this option of pardoning people, and a lot of pardons take place either at the beginning or at the end. I think Lincoln pardoned 100,000 Confederate soldiers after the Civil War because he wanted to unite the country. But now we have Biden pardoning his own son, and then preemptive pardons, I think, of Hillary and Fauci. Roger, can you throw any more light on that? Should it be there, or should it be, pardons, provided the Senate in majority agrees as well?
oh, I'm sorry, I don't understand. What are you saying? The Senate and who
Well,
has to agree to a
there is
pardon?
a proposal that instead of the president having unilateral pardon to pardon just about anyone, he would have to go through the Senate. In
No,
addition to, yeah.
no. I don't have any comment on that except a raspberry, which I won't do. Um, um, I think that first of all, legitimate pardons don't put you or who you pardon above the law, and they don't break the rule of law. They are part of the law. They're part of the Constitution. Now, if somebody wants to say the Constitution is defective because of that, well, okay. The problem is the Constitution doesn't spell out the limits on the power of the pardon. Is it unlimited? Can you pardon anybody, period, no matter what they've done? And also, can you do whatever you call it, going backwards in time to what someone has done but not been charged with, and all this other stuff? It seems perverse and it seems dishonorable to give out blanket pardons for crimes that haven't even been charged. And I think that's going to come before the court. So I'll just let that lay there. I do think there's more than one way to skin a cat, like I said before. Suppose the Congress or Trump through an executive order says Fauci or Liz Cheney or Adam Schiff cannot hold any future position in federal government. Well, that would certainly be challenged, but I think it would be a real kind of justice for what they deserve, and it would raise the issue and say this is why we're punishing them. The optics would be delicious even if it weren't upheld. But go to the 14th Amendment just briefly. They say that if you're guilty of insurrection, that can be removed by the Congress voting to pardon you, okay? Because the Congress represents the people. Oh, okay. Well, what about if the people vote for you in an election like they did for Trump? In effect, in my opinion, the voters of the United States pardoned Trump if he was guilty of anything. They pardoned him by electing him president. They said it just as surely as if the Senate or the Congress had pardoned him if he'd been even found guilty, which he wasn't. He was never charged. No one has been charged with insurrection. So I hope that the new Attorney General, Pam Bondi, is going to look at the options for getting at some of these people who have been pardoned and see if she can't get them to still flip on people higher up that were tasking them for their bad deeds. They might be able to find some leverage with them, but I don't know what that would be. Um, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't play one
Okay.
on
Well,
on TV.
actually, Ed is a lawyer, and I want to add to that question. Ed, Fauci has been kind of preemptively pardoned for anything and everything he did, as I understand it.
Ugh.
Does that prevent the US from putting on a show trial on national television? And yes, even if he's found guilty, he can't be imprisoned. Or are we prevented from even putting, Fauci into congressional hearing or on trial?
Well, I would kind of resist the phrase show trial, but what they can do is they can subpoena him to testify in Congress, and he either defies the subpoena, in which case you can put him in, you can go criminal contempt of court the way they did with Bannon and with that other advisor whose name escapes me right now. You can go after him that way, or if he does testify and he lies, then you can prosecute him for perjury. And if he testifies and tells the truth, that's your quote show trial, right? That's getting the facts out there. And I'm all for that. I think that they should do that. As far as the pardons generally, I'm probably in the minority on this one, but I think of it as akin to jury nullification. In both cases, you might have a guilty defendant, or might not. You might have a guilty defendant, and we're asking for a limit on the power of the government to punish. And I think that in both cases, I'm okay with it. I also think that in the case of the pardon, I think that you have a separation of powers issue. I don't want Congress and the president to have to work together on very much. I mean, lawmaking, okay, but punishment, I think, is an executive function. I don't believe it's a legislative function, other than to set what the law and the limits are. I think that if the president wants to, if the executive branch wants to exercise discretion on who to charge, who not to charge, when to prosecute, when not to prosecute, that's an executive function. I mean, we've got the Eric Adams case pending right now, where the executive has decided we don't want to prosecute him for whatever reason. And we've got a judge saying, well, I'm going to appoint somebody to file a brief as to whether or not there's a case against them. And that's a complete violation of separation of powers, too. We have separation of powers for a good reason. And we also live by the premise that it's better that 10 guilty go free than that one innocent man goes to jail. I think that limits on the power of the government to punish are almost always a good thing. I won't say always, because I can think of instances where they're not. But I think that I'm fine with the pardons. And as far as the preemptive pardons, I mean, Jimmy Carter preemptively pardoned all the draft dodgers. If we had a better governor in New York, somebody or in Georgia, Trump might have been pardoned before he was charged in any of these cases. So I mean, it kind of works both ways. I mean, I don't think that we should be, selectively picking, or just saying, well, we don't like these particular preemptive pardons, so we should get rid of the pardon power. We should get rid of preemptive pardons. I think it's a political question. I think that it's a separation of powers question, and those two issues, separation of powers and political question, are far more important than the particulars of any individual case that's involved.
Okay, David, let me call it a truth trial. I'd like to see one on Fauci. And instead of dodging the draft was a specific crime, I understand Fauci is like any of his actions from whatever 2017 till now is all pardoned. David?
Well, no, I don't think preemptive pardons for someone who has obviously committed perjury in front of Congress. I mean, that is so obviously a cover your ass move, by the left. I mean, they know these people lied in their testimony before Congress, and if the truth comes out, it's going to implicate them too. So they're trying to avoid that. So no, you can't sit there before Congress on an issue like COVID and just lie your ass off the way Fauci did. Now, in regard to the pardons of the January 6th protesters, I wanted to say the Constitution gives a right to a speedy jury trial, right? So, I mean, was that right observed in any of those cases? I mean, some of those people spent so much time in jail without being charged for much of, anything. And I think that, that's a great reason for Trump to say, hey, whatever, let them all go with time served. All right. And that, even that is, much more of a punishment than they deserve. So and that's an issue I haven't heard much talk about, which is what happened to speedy trials.
Good. Ruth?
I agree with a lot of what Ed said, and I think that because it's a political question, in part, Roberts might not even want to get involved at the Supreme Court. So, he's loath to get involved in any political questions. So and that might end up being a very unsatisfying route to take. I am not in favor of any proposal that would change a president's Article 2 rights, including the right of, to pardon people before or after trial, before or after verdicts. I mean, it seems, pretty broad. And so I'm not in favor of changing that. I mean, we'd have to amend the Constitution, and I don't want anybody's mitts on my Constitution, okay? Just leave it alone. It's perfect the way it is. That's how I feel about that. But we might have leverage that people have not considered, and this is because some of these things are way back in the midst of time. For example, Fauci, yes, he committed perjury in front of Congress regarding his actions during COVID. But was he pardoned for the original sin of funding gain-of-function research when Obama's directive had forbidden it? Was he pardoned for that? He could possibly be tried for that. And was Hillary pardoned for Benghazi? She certainly committed.
Quite.
Fauci did commit perjury in front of Congress, but the pardon, I believe, would cover that. Yeah.
So Trump ended up endorsing Ramaswamy. I thought that's a really good move, even though it's kind of 2 years out and all that.
Am I here? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm reconnecting.
Yeah.
We lost some of that, Ruth, but we will edit out that interruption. I want to move on to the discussion we had about Ramaswamy's bid, whether he was fired from Doge. If he was, Trump would not have endorsed his campaign, which he has.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's great thing because while, Trump is strong, the party is strong, spread your wings. You got a lot of good people. The two CEOs of Doge would have not worked. Two CEOs never
Mhm.
worked. And meanwhile, if he became the governor there, someone else for Congress, someone else for Senate, spread the wings. So
Mhm.
it's a good thing, I think. What do you think?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think he has a good chance of winning, and fellow Buckeye Vice President Vance will campaign for him. And he supports the MAGA agenda, which parts of which 70% of all voters approve. So I think he has a good chance of winning. Kudos to him for pivoting that way.
Okay. David, is that a good move to spread the wings of the sort of MAGA movement or whatever you want to call it?
I mean, I missed part of the question here. That
I see that, not Ramaswamy was sacked from Doge for a bad tweet because the same tweet was also made by Elon Musk, but it's more of a strategic plan for the right side of the GOP to spread their wings and let people, go for county appointments or bureaucratic appointments. But those who are in favor of the anti deep state movement, the more they spread, the better it is.
yeah, no, I mean, I think the rhinos, the Mitch McConnells, are already kind of scurrying for cover, right? I don't think that, I mean, if things continue to go the way they've gone the last month, I don't see much of a future for those people. So uh, if this continues to gather momentum, Trump is going to get genuine patriots who are not taking money under the table and don't have the kind of corruption that we've seen for decades. So I see, um, yeah, I'm. I don't think that people. I mean, the the George Bushes, the Mitch McConnells. If Trump wins, those people are done.
And
Well, I think it's a good thing that MAGA is spreading its wings, as you say. I think that uh, Ramaswamy running for governor of Ohio is a good thing. I think that he was pushed out, though, because he attacked Americans and said that, there's too many of us that are not hardworking enough, not well educated enough, don't value education, and that, and more importantly, that there are a lot of people from India and well, primarily India, that value education better and are smarter and more hardworking. And I think he was pushed out before MAGA could turn against him. And I'm not sure if he even got pushed out. Maybe somebody tapped him on the shoulder and said, you just insulted MAGA. You need to you need to go, and because you're not going to win the governorship without MAGA. And so that's why I think that he's gone, and that's why I think that Musk didn't say those same things. Musk only said that he's okay with some immigration, which he actually had to backpedal. Also, MAGA came out against that too. So that's what I think. I think that Ramaswamy's comments were not acceptable to MAGA, and before it could lead to a bigger crisis, he was basically removed from the situation before it could get out of hand.
Roger?
Yeah. My
Yeah,
understanding is the same as Ed's.
Okay.
um, yeah, Ed, I agree with that. I think that Vivek would have been better off to frame it like in our federal workforce, we have a cancer of wanting to collect a paycheck while sitting at home and doing something other than your job. And I don't want to see this become an epidemic in our country. And we need to include as many of the hardworking people, ambitious people from other countries as we can to offset this tendency that has been fostered by bad policies in the government. If he had the the insight to approach it that way, he could have. It wouldn't have been an insult to MAGA. Now, as far as running for governor, okay, I'd like to see him in the Senate. I think his verbal talents, his brilliance would be really good there. He'd be good to have in there alongside of Rand Paul, for instance. I'm glad that he quit Doge. I think Elon is the better person to head the group. They might have been sideways with each other going forward, and I think that there's an issue with the ethnicity and the accent and the high energy level, but because he's very intelligent and articulate, but he kind of sounds like a high pressure salesman, and he sounds a little bit condescending. And if you remember from the debates, he was saying, "Hey, I'm not beholden to anyone, and every one of you here on the stage is on the take." And he's so blunt that maybe you need somebody that's not so blunt in Doge and is just bearing down and getting the work done, finding the corruption, and not being on the soapbox and saying the inflammatory things. So maybe as governor, he's going to have to work with establishment people, because I don't think he can get elected with votes just from Trump-leaning people. He's going to have to get a lot of moderates too. So he's going to have to figure out how to talk to the people back in Ohio.
Yeah, I agree with you. There was a bit of a condescending way of speaking during the early part of the campaign. Absolutely. Okay, we have time for just one very last question, if people can be brief. So name one appointment, only one, that Trump has made to his cabinet that thrilled you the most. Okay, we'll go with Roger first.
Oh my, one pick. Well, I liked Rubio out of the barrel when he stood up and was talking. He's going to be an outstanding Secretary of State. I'm really surprised, but he rose to the occasion. And so many of them are good, but he was the first one to impress me, and I thought, man, we are heading off on the right foot.
Ed?
Oh, me?
Ed?
Oh, Ed?
Yeah. Pick one only.
Trump's best pick, in my view, probably Kash Patel.
Ooh.
David?
I don't know. Does Elon Musk count?
Sure.
I mean, bringing in a businessman like that to investigate the corruption, and with that attitude of looking at government like it was a business and saying, okay, what can I get rid of? How can I manage these people? And okay, you're accountable now. What did you do this week? In private enterprise, you don't get away with the kind of stuff that people do in government. And Musk knows that. And he's enforcing the kind of standards that most Americans live by.
Ruth? Oh, sorry. Continue. Yeah.
Well, I was most excited by RFK Jr. He's going to do great things at HHS. One thing that he will absolutely do is bring out the fraud, waste, and abuse of taxpayer dollars to NIH for research. I think he will also restore the pre-COVID standards of proven safety and efficacy before FDA approval. And I think that he will also rescind approval of SSRIs and other drug classes that have serious side effects found after they had been rolled out population-wide. And of course, rethinking the number and clustering of vaccines given to children. These are all huge things, and I'm most thrilled by his appointment.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here today. I think we had a fascinating and interesting discussion. So thank you again. And to all the viewers out there, tune in to the Savvy Street Show that makes you more savvy. And good night and good luck.